Another interesting character, one of my favorites, Alan Adler, joins us now. Alan, thanks for being here this morning.
Did you really compare me to Elon Musk? Did you really do that?
I may have. I just think so highly of you both.
I'm completely off my pins now. I don't know where to go. Oh, it's Truck Tech, right?
Yes, it's Truck Tech, and I'm excited for this one because you're diving into something a little bit interesting here, talking about some earnings releases and reports. Is that right?
Yeah, this stuff isn't great reading, but there's all kinds of interesting information there. And Anthony, as an economist, you know this because I'm sure you spend time on the analyst reports and things like that. I just grabbed up a few things this week. I mean, we had to come up with a title where people would actually open the newsletter, so we called it, summer reading edition today. This is not stuff for the beach, quite honestly. It's a little more dense than that. But we did find some really interesting things on some of the companies that we've been watching, especially in the transportation and electrification startup space. I think the biggest one that stood out to me, quite honestly, was it's kind of over on page 12 in the Aurora shareholder newsletter, Aurora Innovation being one of the autonomous trucking companies. We've seen these stock prices plummet. We've seen the sentiment towards SPACs and companies that went public through special purpose acquisition companies, just lose a lot of favor. They're sort of like nobody likes them anymore. And quite honestly, what that's done is it's driven their stock prices to incredible lows. Aurora itself, which probably hit around $17 a share last year, right around the time it went public, is down to about $2.68 as of yesterday. What that prompted was, and I know, Anthony, you know this, I hope our viewers do too, but there's a term on the balance sheet called goodwill. And basically that says this is how we value our assets, including things like our outstanding shares. Aurora had to take a $1 billion hit against its goodwill because its stock value has fallen so far. It's a non-cash charge, but it does reduce the value of the company overall, and it's one of those things that we should be watching for in some of these other small companies. We also look at Proterra, and actually the CEO there came flat out and said it. They just don't like us anymore, and it isn't a question of the business not doing well. Proterra, technically is not a startup. It was a SPAC, but it's been around for about 17, 18 years. And they were mostly known for electric buses for the first 15 or so years of their life. Last couple of years, they've gotten into batteries and they've gotten into the infrastructure space. Two businesses that are growing and do have quite a bit of potential, especially with some of the if we do get the inflation bill passed, there's a lot of money in there for electrification. Incentives and things like that. So a couple of businesses that are young, but actually doing quite well. But Proterra too is having a hard time getting any sort of traction. And it was just interesting to me that they, called it out and said, people are just looking at, margin improvement and, cash and things like that. They're just not interested in the growth story much anymore. I think a lot of them are getting hit that way. We also touch on Workhorse in this edition. We talk a little bit about Lordstown Motors, which again, there's one that probably would have gone under without having a white knight in the Foxconn purchase of their business and of the plant, which, interestingly enough, Lordstown never had to pay anything for that plant, and they sold it for $257 million, which essentially keeps them alive.
Gotcha. And I think that's a great point. I mean, you say they didn't essentially pay anything, but then they banked $257 million. I mean, how long does something like that keep them alive? I guess that's the better question. I mean, is it just a short-term fix to a longer-term issue? Is it something that can keep them afloat for, say, another 5 years? Is there any like guidance or kind of around like how it works?
Tony, what happened is they sold their soul as well as the furniture, right? I mean, they entered into a joint venture. They are arguably the lead electrification manufacturer for Foxconn. The issue with both Lordstown and Foxconn, which is some people may know them as the maker of Apple iPhones, the software for the iPhones the assembly of iPhones in Asia for Apple. Neither Foxconn nor Lordstown has ever built a vehicle for sale. That's really the issue. Now they're a joint venture, so you have two companies that have never built a vehicle for sale. And there's a lot of questions around the Lordstown product. The Endurance commercial electric pickup truck is aimed at small fleets and construction, things like that. It has a technology that has been called into some question called hub wheel motors. Are they going to be durable enough for like heavier use? Not on highway necessarily, but on construction sites and that sort of thing. So we'll see what happens there. But essentially, they live today because Foxconn came to their rescue. Otherwise, they would be gone. And the great, massive, and I mean 6.2 million square feet, massive plant that GM ran there for 53 years would be sitting idle yet again. And, there's a lot, we recount some of that history in the newsletter today, but honestly, the Lordstown story, it really didn't get any better. It just continues.
And Alan, this is an interesting topic that I didn't really quite think about too much, but can you talk about Embark trucks and really being able to pull over for inspection?
There's something cute about that, isn't there? The whole idea that the truck will talk to the cop. I thought that was really good. I think at another day we might have actually done a separate story on that. But given that it came out yesterday, we were sort of, this is earnings week, as Noy and others are pointing out on the show. So there's a lot going on out there. But the Embark development is interesting. I spent some time with them about a year ago out in California and rode in their truck. Their supervised autonomous truck, as are these, the ones that are being tested for in Texas to pull over for law enforcement. They have drivers, but those drivers are obviously there just to watch and monitor what's going on. What's interesting about Embark, and I think is consistent about Embark, is that they have set out 16 things, kind of a technology roadmap that they need to hit before they are ready for commercialization. This one, pulling over for law enforcement, is number 12 out of 16. And we have a little chart in the newsletter today that from Embark that shows sort of the ones they've been able to check off. So very deliberate at Embark, another company that's just been hammered. Its stock price is 53 cents right now. Never was a huge hitter. I mean, when it came out, it dropped immediately. Typically when the SPAC companies merge and go public, they start out, the price that investors paid was $10 a share. This one came out and immediately dropped to about $8.80 and has been going down ever since. At one point, it was over 14. I'm not exactly sure when that was, and it wasn't for long. But aside from the financial viability, and we have to keep looking at this and watching this because we have seen some of these companies, electric last mile solutions, and a few others that are really in trouble and have gone under or close to going under. Interestingly enough, a few weeks ago, Canoo, which does a Class 1 delivery van, got a big contract with Walmart. That'll save them for a while, but who knows long term how they're going to do. So I think we're going to see more mergers and acquisitions. We saw that with Nikola this week purchasing Romeo Power, another company that was on the bubble, truthfully, and probably was not going to make it. Nikola was concerned because Romeo, it was Romeo's biggest customer for battery packs, and Nikola said in its earnings yesterday that it's not going to make as many trucks in the third quarter as it did in the second because of those battery pressures. So now it controls its own supply chain, which is very important. And another one of the SPAC companies is, kind of absorbed and, disappears as a separate entity.
Seems like there's a lot of stuff going on in the truck tech space. I mean, outside of what's in this newsletter, anything you're looking forward to over the next week?
Well, yeah, I just want to plug one that's up there this morning, which is the review of the 57X from Western Star. We're not the first to report on that review, but we had quite a week this week, and again with earnings and other things. The 57X is interesting. It is an on-highway truck from a group that largely is known for vocational vehicles, but this truck, truthfully, is sort of an epitome, not the epitome, but an epitome of both luxury and technology in terms of, on-road stuff. This is aimed at sort of your owner-operators and small fleets that are focused on business aspects. But we're talking brushed metal, we're talking digital everything, and even the speakers in the doors, everything is super modern inside. And honestly, you think more about a luxury SUV than you do about a Class 8 truck when you get in this thing. Drivability, amazingly great. We were out at the American Center for Mobility, which isn't very far from here in Detroit, and they have a 2.5-mile course out there that we were able to drive the truck on, a closed course. Things like lane keep assist, which basically pushes you back in your lane if you start to drift, has massively improved from the original version that the Detroit Technology Group out of Daimler Truck developed. And I wouldn't say it's seamless, but it's not jarring anymore. And, it's still annoying if you get into lane departure where you drift and you get, sort of that haptic sound, that boom, 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 that you've obviously gone out of your lane without intending to. That's still annoying, but in a way that's meant to be annoying. And, but technology, drivability, quietness in the cab, all of them, high marks from somebody who is not a CDL driver.
Excellent. Well, Alan, I'm looking forward to this edition of Truck Tech. Thanks so much for joining us this morning, and we'll be sure to follow up with you again next week. Right now, we're going to take a short break, but we'll be right back with more Cruisers.